welcome. So here we have Alex Walker. You were in top 8. What were you playing?
Chose to play Soirees today for this tournament.
And why did you actually opt to play for this deck?
So, we started testing for this tournament a few weeks ago, and we were kind of batting a few ideas around, and we thought that the new Zidane from Opus 19, as well as the new War of Light, the multi-element one, were just like far and away two of the best cards that they've printed possibly in the whole game. And we found that the best shell that was consistent enough to play with these was Soirees. It also allowed you to play. It was very easy to kind of tech the deck against whatever you thought the meta would be. Going in, we thought that Soirees and the Category 13 aggro deck were going to be like two real big contenders, and we felt pretty confident that our build of Soirees was pretty good in the mirror. You had game against Cat 13. The deck doesn't really feel like it has any major weaknesses, and I think
maybe we can slowly show the deck.
Absolutely, yeah.
So then you can already start talking about the tech that you put in there. So that's going to be interesting as well.
So, as I mentioned before, we have the Zidanes. So 3 of this card. This card is absolutely bonkers. It's disruption and the fact that it can get in. If you're getting in like 2 points of damage with this card, you already feel like you've got your value off it, as well as being able to shred.
And just the hand information is so much.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Being able to look twice on the turn it comes down is ridiculous. It's so like you can completely like change your game plan just based on what you're seeing with this card alone. And the fact that it's a 7k as well means that even like if it is blocked by something that costs 2 or less, generally it's usually big enough to kind of at least trade, if not just beat it in combat.
Yes.
2 bash. Bashes, we had 3 bash, we've gone down to 2 because we had to make room for some other cards, but this card both allows you to kind of find any kind of start of an engine, especially like it's able to find a lot of the Soiree pieces like Materia, Amber and Shinju as the backups, but it also then can find Elbis if you need spot removal.
Yes.
And it's if you want Tyro or Shantoto, it's there. It's really good, and the amount of EX burst this deck plays, I think it plays about 17, means that if you're able to kind of hit an EX burst Tyro and then also search, then you feel like you're miles ahead of your opponent being able to tutor for basically whatever you want in that situation.
Yes. Soiree is kind of known for a lot of experts as well.
Yeah, well, we started off with it was over 20. It was a lot. We had to cut them down though because we found that some of the cards with the EX bursts, you didn't really want to actually draw them. They were great when you flip them off the top, like cards like Remora, but we found that they were just like once you drew them, they were pretty clunky, and so we opted to go for the philosophy was more every 4 that you play. I wanted it to have immediate impact on the board, either
and
with
it has a value.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted it either to have haste and attack, or blow something up, or search, or draw. As long as it had impact, then it was like a worthy inclusion. So then the Soiree package, we had 3 Merald. This card, being able to actually have just like a clean break that doesn't revolve around damage was really important.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of cards going around at the moment that like damage isn't going to be enough to kill them sometimes. And also the haste threat is great, especially if you're bringing it out of the break zone with Madame Adele. 2 Irwin for some more hand disruption. We didn't want to go 3 on these just because the ice cost is relevant. You're not going to be able to pitch it for things as much.
And you already got like 3 Zidanes, so
exactly.
it's
so like
gonna trade off.
That package is usually pretty good, especially if you're playing against like wind decks, for example.
Yes.
That was like the strategy we had against the wind decks was an early Zidane backed up with an Irwin can usually help gain enough momentum that you're able to carry on the grindy game, which inevitably comes from that. 3 Vesphia, because drawing 2 cards for 1 card is just amazing value, and
just
it's
a choice of value.
Yeah, it's the kind of best generic Soiree member to get off Madame Adele. Like if there's no targets for Merald, unless you're kind of swinging for game or pressure, then Vesphia is just going to be keeping you in the game. And then War of Light, which was an all-star. This card is insane. Like if you're actually like casting it with your backups, being able to untap, draw, and carry on going while having this 10k haste threat in play. This card was an absolute all-star. I think it's incredibly powerful and is even without the Soirees, like I think I would have played a deck with this card because it's just so powerful.
But in my opinion, I kind of feel like Warrior of Light, this one is basically made for Soiree.
Oh, for sure, yeah. We were originally playing with like the Kirins.
The Kirin, Acro Kirin.
The
you mean.
six cost Kirin.
Yes. So you're just gonna go more in Acro.
So yeah, but we found that consistency was a bit of a factor with that because there were times where like you would flip, you know, a Warrior of Light or even like a Rinnower that is then able to go again with the Kirin. But there were some games where it felt like it wasn't as a consistent grindy deck as this one was. This one is a little bit more controlling, maybe a little bit more less explosive. And then we have 2 Cecil, which is good for protection against a lot of Yuffie decks. They have to like forcing them to pay extra CP to target stuff is
just
good.
to taxate them out.
Exactly, and it's also just like you have so many 4-drops with amazing value that being able to put in a Warrior of Light with Cecil, even without the untap, is still good. You know, you put a Materia in, you get a Vesphere out, you spent 1 card to get that +2 draws. It's just amazing value. It's also a wind card, which is relevant because we decided to play a Yuffie package as well. So we had 3 of the Yuffie, which I think is incredibly strong. One of the best cards in the game. We have 1/1 as well as a extra discard fodder for her Doom of the Living.
Yes.
Doom of the Living has been absolutely incredible the whole tournament. You really have to be wary of it, and you like keeping track of how many Yuffies your opponent has seen has been really relevant.
Exactly. Once she hits the field, it's very difficult to get rid of her.
Yeah, she's really tough. Like the fact that she becomes a 10k blocker on the same turn that can't just be,
Undruggable.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like this card, I think Warrior of Light, Yuffie, and Zidane, I think are like just some of the best cards in the game at the moment, and the philosophy of just being able to play the deck with all of the best cards in the game was kind of enough to push me towards playing this. In terms of backups then, 3 Shinju, which is mandatory if you're playing Soiree,
exactly.
2 Lexa. We have 2 Mana, which is Ninja Searcher, so it can find some Yuffie. It's also Win CP as well. 4 Amber, again mandatory. And then in summons we were playing 2 Opus 10 Chocobo. 3
Yeah,
Q.
when you were showcasing, I was kind of surprised to see the Chocobo.
This was a late inclusion, and not many. I don't think anyone else was playing
I did
it
not
as far as
expect
decks.
it to when you were sorting your cards. I was kind of surprised by
We
it.
originally had Amaterasu for the longest time, and then even I think about 1 or 2 weeks ago, we were talking about it and we discussed that like Amaterasu, we weren't really doing much with it. Like it was rarely coming up, and we were usually just using it for fire CP for either Zidane or Bash. But the value of Chocobo with cards like Vesphere, Merald, Madame Adele, Bash, like all of these cards have amazing enter the field triggers, and Chocobo is both able to kind of capitalize on that as well as protect your cards from Doom of the Living,
for example, Amaretsu.
Exactly, yeah. Like this, in one game in the Swiss, I was able to pick up a Merald and replay it for another haste creature, basically to get its ETB, break their blocker, and get in. So it was a really good card. I think I would actually possibly play a third. I was playing 1 Hecatonk here as a kind of catch-all, a little bit of a nod towards Cat 13, but I haven't actually played against Cat 13 at all today, or yesterday. So the third Chocobo is certainly something I'm considering. It's also another wind card for Yuffie's S effect, because the deck isn't. It can produce 2 wind from its backups, but there are sometimes where you might have 2 Yuffies in hand and not enough wind to S effect. This helps with that, especially in a deck with so many elements. 2 Mist Dragon. Break zone interaction is very important, especially in the mirror against Cat 6. If you're able to Mist Dragon a break zone in response to Umaro being brought out of the break zone, it's a huge blowout, making them discard 2 cards for no value.
Yes.
And then 3 Kusith, mostly for the EX burst, but it also means that you can discard cards like Warrior of Light early and not worry that you're not going to be able to find them again later in the game.
Yes. So what were your matchup that you had during Swiss?
So in the Swiss, I played against 2 Soiree decks as a mirror match. We played against Category 7 / Warrior of Light pod, basically. So it's like a similar kind of game plan. They were also playing Cecils and Warrior of Lights, but with instead of like a Soiree engine, it was a Cat 7 engine with cards like ZG and Aerith, the light Aerith that's able to bring Category 7 players back. We also played against, I can't remember now, Earth Lightning Control, which is a really, really good matchup for this deck. They're not able to kind of keep up with your pace. You are able to outgrind them with the amount of value that your cards produce, and they usually are only putting one thing into play at a turn, which you're able to kind of swarm over them as well. My one loss in the Swiss was to Ice Lightning. I do feel that matchup is a little bit tough. Arcanist as a backup it can slow you down quite a lot. You do have some diversity in your numbers from 4, 5, 2, but if they are able to kind of lock you down with that, it can slow you right down. It was a very close game, and it came down to multi-element lightning off the top, which was able to dull my remaining blockers.
So we heard about your matchup and also the difficulties, but what was actually the most difficult for you to deal with?
So my loss in top 8 was to Mono Wind. He's a very, very good Mono Wind pilot, and game 1 didn't really swing my way. Game 2 was a very, very close, grindy game. We went on for a long time, but the deck wasn't quite able to keep up with some of the value from like Lulu and Asura. Zidane, not this Zidane, the Mono Wind 2-drop Zidane that's able to take cards off the top of your library is really, really strong against, when your Warrior of Light gets taken with Zidane or your Yuffie, you feel like you're in trouble. So I played against Icewind in the Swiss as well, that was also doing that. It was a point where I had to Hecatomb care the board, especially if it's something that actually has relevancy against your own deck. If you have your Cecil stolen from them, making all of your Yuffies and Merrills cost 2 more to activate is pretty rough.
So we heard about the difficulties, and so as you said earlier, you wanted to maybe change a certain cards. What would you change after the tournament?
All in all, I'm actually really, really happy with this list. It felt very tight. They didn't really feel like there was much like dead air or anything like that. I would consider, depending on how much aggro decks there are in your format, I would possibly consider cutting a Hecatomb care for maybe a 3rd Chocobo. I think that having 2 Mist Dragons is also really important. We did cut down to 1, and we found that we just were so desperate for the break zone interaction that the 2 I think is the minimum. In terms of the forwards, you could possibly shave an Irwin, but I think that a lot of these numbers are, I think, pretty locked for me. I would be happy running this back in another big tournament myself.
Okay. So thank you for the deck profile.
Thank you.
And any last words?
Keep playing FFTCD.
Perfect. Thank you
Thank you very
again.
much.
And congrats on top 8.
Thank you.